lonely rancher found a young Apache girl hanging on a tree with a sign, "White man don't forgive." The morning sun cast long shadows across the New Mexico desert as Samuel Hayes rode his horse through the familiar landscape he'd called home for nearly 15 years. At 35, he'd grown accustomed to the solitude of ranch life, the way the wind whispered through the sagebrush, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Samuel had inherited the ranch from his uncle, a gruff but good-hearted man who'd taught him that the land demanded respect, and that sometimes the greatest gifts came from the most unexpected places. The old man had often said, "Son, kindness is like water in the desert, rare, precious, and life-giving." On this particular morning, something felt different. The air carried an unusual stillness, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Samuel's horse, a gentle mare named Pepper, seemed to sense it too, her ears twitching toward a cluster of cottonwood trees near the old creek bed. As they approached, Samuel's heart nearly stopped. There, suspended from a sturdy branch, was a young woman. Her long black hair hung like silk in the morning light, and she wore traditional Apache clothing, a beautiful dress of soft buckskin with intricate beadwork that caught the sun's rays. But it was the crude wooden sign tied around her neck that made Samuel's blood run cold. "White man don't forgive." It read in uneven letters. Samuel dismounted quickly, his hands steady despite the shock. The woman appeared to be unconscious, her breathing shallow but present. She couldn't have been more than 26, with features that spoke of both strength and vulnerability. Someone had meant this as a warning, or perhaps a test. "Easy now," Samuel whispered, more to himself than to the unconscious woman. He'd learned long ago that desperation made people do terrible things. But he'd also learned that mercy was a choice that defined a man's character. With careful movements, Samuel lifted her down from the tree. She was lighter than he'd expected, and as he cradled her in his arms, he noticed the faint scent of sage and sweet grass that clung to her clothing. Her face, peaceful in unconsciousness, reminded him of his grandmother's words about angels walking among us in unexpected forms. Samuel carried her to his horse, then began the careful journey back to his ranch house. The ride took nearly an hour, and during that time, he found himself thinking about the choices that had led him to this moment. He could have ridden away, pretended he'd never seen her. But his uncle's voice echoed in his mind. "The measure of a man isn't in what he takes from this world, Samuel. It's in what he gives back." The ranch house sat modest and welcoming against the backdrop of red rock mesas. Samuel had built onto it over the years, adding a comfortable porch where he'd often sit in the evenings, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Now, as he carried the young woman inside, the house felt different, less empty somehow. He laid her gently on the couch in his sitting room, then fetched water and clean cloths from the kitchen. As he began to tend to her, checking for injuries and ensuring she was comfortable, the woman's eyes fluttered open. They were the color of earth after rain, dark and deep, with a wariness that spoke of too much hardship for someone so young. She tensed immediately upon seeing him, her hand moving instinctively to her throat where the sign had been. "It's all right," Samuel said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe now? I'm Samuel Hayes, and this is my ranch. I found you by the creek." The woman's eyes darted around the room, taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings, the books on the shelves, the Native American blanket draped over a chair that his uncle had traded for years ago. Her gaze returned to Samuel's face, searching for something. Perhaps sincerity, perhaps danger. "The sign," she whispered, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "I took it off," Samuel replied gently. "Whatever happened to you, whoever did this, it's over now. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need." She studied him for a long moment, and Samuel could see the internal struggle playing out behind her eyes. Trust, he knew, was like a tender plant. It needed time and the right conditions to grow. "I am Maria," she said finally, her voice growing stronger. "Maria Delgado. My people, they cast me out." Samuel nodded, understanding that some stories came slowly, like water seeping through stone. "Would you like something to eat?" "Some water." Over the following days, Maria's story unfolded in quiet moments between chores and meals. She had been caught between two worlds, her Apache heritage and her love for a Mexican trader who had promised her a different life. When that man abandoned her, taking with him not just her heart but also her reputation, her own people had turned against her. They said, "I brought shame to our way of life." Maria explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. The sign. It was their way of saying I was no longer one of them. Samuel listened without judgment, understanding the weight of belonging, and the pain of losing it. He'd felt his own form of exile when his parents died, leaving him to find his place in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. People sometimes do cruel things when they're afraid, he said quietly. But that doesn't make those things right. As the weeks passed, Maria began to heal, not just from her physical ordeal, but from the deeper wounds of rejection and betrayal. Samuel found himself looking forward to their conversations, the way she moved through his house with quiet grace, the sound of her laughter when something genuinely amused her. She had gentle hands and a gift for coaxing life from the desert soil. Together, they worked to expand the small garden behind the house, planting vegetables and herbs that would flourish in the harsh climate. Samuel watched her work with plants and realized she understood something fundamental about nurturing, about giving things time to grow. My grandmother taught me that everything has its season, Maria said one morning as they worked side by side. Pain has its season too, but so does healing. Samuel found wisdom in her words, recognizing a truth he'd been learning slowly over the years. Life wasn't about avoiding hardship, it was about how you chose to respond to it. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Maria asked about his family. Samuel told her about his uncle, about the loneliness that had settled over the ranch like dust after the old man's death. He spoke of the weight of carrying on alone, of wondering sometimes if he was living up to his uncle's example. Loneliness is not the same as being alone, Maria said thoughtfully. Your uncle, he is still here in the way you treat others, in the way you treated me. Her words struck something deep in Samuel's chest. He realized that in caring for Maria, he'd found a purpose beyond just maintaining the ranch. He'd found a way to honor his uncle's memory by living out the values the old man had taught him. Winter came early that year, bringing cold nights and the need to huddle close to the fireplace. Samuel gave Maria his bedroom and took to sleeping on the couch, but often they'd both end up in the sitting room, sharing stories and warmth as the wind howled outside. It was during one of these evenings that Maria first spoke of her fears about the future. I cannot stay here forever, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know where I belong anymore. Samuel had been dreading this conversation, though he'd known it would come. Over the months, Maria had become more than just a guest in his house. She'd become the missing piece he hadn't known he was looking for. You belong wherever you choose to belong, he said carefully. But if you're asking, I'd like you to stay. Not as a guest, but as... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound presumptuous or demanding. A's family? He finished simply. Maria looked at him then with those earth-colored eyes, and Samuel saw something shift in her expression. The wariness was still there, but it was tempered now with something else. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. I would like that, she said softly. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers across the desert floor, and with it came a sense of new beginnings. Maria had fully recovered her strength, and together she and Samuel worked to improve the ranch. She taught him techniques for water conservation that her people had used for generations, while he shared his knowledge of cattle management and crop rotation. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and covering for each other's weaknesses. More importantly, they'd found in each other a companionship that neither had expected. One morning, as they worked in the garden, Maria suddenly straightened and shaded her eyes with her hand. In the distance, a group of riders approached. Samuel felt his stomach tighten as he recognized the traditional dress of Apache warriors. They've come for me, Maria said quietly, though her voice held no fear, only a kind of resigned acceptance. Samuel stepped closer to her, his presence a silent statement of support. They'll have to go through me first. The riders drew closer, and Samuel could see there were 5 of them, led by an older man with silver streaking his black hair. They stopped just outside the fence that surrounded the ranch house, and the leader dismounted. Maria Delgado, the man called out in English, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I am Joseph Crowfeather. We have come to speak with you. Maria walked forward, her chin raised with quiet dignity. Samuel followed, staying slightly behind but within arm's reach. I am listening, Maria replied. Joseph Crowfeather studied her for a long moment, then let his gaze move to Samuel. Your absence has been noted, Your grandmother. She is dying. She asks for you." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Samuel saw her shoulders sag slightly, and he moved closer, offering silent support. "How long?" Maria asked. "Perhaps days. Perhaps weeks. She wishes to see you before she walks the spirit path." Samuel felt the weight of the moment settling around them. He understood that this was bigger than just Maria's personal journey. This was about family, about the complicated ties that bind us to the people who shaped us, even when those relationships are strained. "I'll go with you," Samuel said quietly. Joseph Crowfeather's eyes sharpened. "This is not your concern, white man. Anything that concerns Maria concerns me," Samuel replied steadily. "She's my family now." The Apache leader studied him for a long moment, as if taking his measure. Finally he nodded slowly. "Your grandmother spoke of you often?" he said to Maria. "She said you would find your way back when the time was right." The journey to Maria's grandmother's home took 2 days, riding through landscape that grew increasingly familiar to Maria as they traveled. Samuel rode beside her, acutely aware that he was entering a world where he was an outsider, but determined to support Maria through whatever lay ahead. The Apache settlement was smaller than Samuel had expected, nestled in a valley between red rock cliffs. As they approached, people emerged from their homes to watch. Samuel felt the weight of their stares, some curious, some hostile, but he kept his focus on Maria. She led him to a small dwelling where an ancient woman lay on a bed of soft furs. Despite her age and illness, her eyes were bright and alert. When she saw Maria, her face lit up with joy. "Granddaughter," she whispered, reaching out with a trembling hand. Maria knelt beside the bed, taking her grandmother's hand in both of hers. "I'm here, grandmother. I'm here." The old woman's eyes moved to Samuel, studying him with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see into his very soul. "You are the one who found her," she said, her voice barely audible. "Yes, ma'am," Samuel replied respectfully. "And you brought her home?" Samuel glanced at Maria, then back to the old woman. "She brought herself home? I just walked alongside her." The grandmother smiled, and Samuel could see where Maria had inherited her quiet strength. "Good answer," she whispered. Over the next few days, Samuel witnessed something beautiful and heartbreaking. Maria's grandmother had used her final time to heal the rift in the family. She spoke to the tribal leaders, reminding them that everyone makes mistakes in their youth, and that wisdom comes from learning to forgive, both others and ourselves. "My granddaughter chose love over tradition," the old woman said during one of the gatherings. "Perhaps she chose poorly, but she chose with her heart. That is not something to be ashamed of." When Maria's grandmother passed peacefully in her sleep, the entire community mourned. But Samuel noticed something else. The way people began to include Maria in their conversations, the way children who had once stared at her with suspicion now approached her with curiosity. Joseph Crowfeather found Samuel on the morning after the funeral. "You could stay," he said. "Both of you. There is room here for those who respect our ways." Samuel considered the offer seriously. There was something appealing about the sense of community he'd witnessed, the way people looked out for one another. "I appreciate that," he said finally, "but I think our home is back at the ranch." Maria's grandmother was right. We all have to find our own way of honoring the past while building the future. Joseph nodded. "Your ranch. It is still your ranch. But perhaps it could be more than that. Perhaps it could be a place where different worlds meet in peace." As they prepared to leave, Maria's aunt approached them with a bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "These were your grandmother's," she said to Maria. "She wanted you to have them." Inside the bundle were pieces of jewelry, clothing, and a small pouch of seeds. "She said you would know what to do with these," the aunt explained. On the ride back to the ranch, Maria was quiet, processing all that had happened. Samuel rode beside her, comfortable with the silence, understanding that some experiences needed time to settle in the heart. "I keep thinking about what Joseph said." Maria finally spoke as they crested the hill that overlooked Samuel's ranch. About the ranch being a place where different worlds meet. Samuel smiled. "I was thinking about that too. What if we did more than just run cattle? What if we created something that could help other people? People who find themselves caught between worlds." Maria turned to look at him, her eyes bright with possibility, like a refuge, like a home. Samuel corrected gently. "A place where people can find their footing again." As they approached the ranch house, Samuel felt a deep sense of rightness about the path that lay ahead. The loneliness that had once filled every corner of his home had been replaced by something richer: purpose, love, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Maria took Samuel's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For showing me that home isn't just a place. It's the people who choose to walk alongside you." The Samuel squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for teaching me that loneliness isn't the same as being alone, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open your heart to someone who needs it." As the stars began to appear in the vast desert sky, Samuel thought about the sign that had brought them together. "White man, don't forgive." The person who had written those words had been wrong about many things, but perhaps most importantly, they'd been wrong about the power of human connection to transcend the boundaries we create for ourselves. In the months that followed, their ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where travelers could find rest, where people down on their luck could find work and dignity, and where the walls between different cultures became a little less imposing. Maria planted her grandmother's seeds in their garden, and as the plants grew, she shared their harvest with anyone who needed it. Samuel expanded the ranch operations, but always with an eye toward sustainable practices that honored the land and its original inhabitants. And in the quiet moments between the work and the visitors, Samuel and Maria built a life together based on the simple but profound truth that kindness, like love, multiplies when it's shared. The sign on the tree had been meant as a warning, but it had become something else entirely. A reminder that forgiveness, like faith, is a choice we make every day, and that sometimes the most important bridges we build are the ones that connect heart to heart. Years later, when people asked Samuel about the secret to their success, he would always smile and say, "We just remembered that everyone has a story worth hearing, and everyone deserves a chance to write a better ending." And Maria, standing beside him with dirt under her fingernails and joy in her eyes, would add, "And sometimes, the best way to heal your own wounds is to help someone else heal theirs." The desert sun would set on another day at the ranch, and the stars would emerge to watch over a place where kindness had taken root and flourished, just as love always does when given the chance to grow.